In this video, we're going to cover some roofing components. So first, make sure you have roofing set as your industry default. Go to your account settings, change it, make sure you're on roofing, save settings. It's important because the roofing industry setting has some different calculations for pitch. Then you want to head to either your dashboard or resources, then go to Smart Components, and this takes you to the Smart Components page. You will have been given some default components depending on the default industry you selected when you signed up. So if you signed up as a roofing business, you will probably see some roofing components. If not, it's easy to create a new library and create some smart components specific to your business. But first, we're going to go through and cover probably 4 to 5 different types of component that could be used for almost anything in roofing. We've created these measurement types that become customizable and modular so that any industry can use them, but especially in this case, roofing. And we'll start with the first one, which is area squared. You'll notice it's got meters squared here. I have selected the metric measurement system in my default settings. You might have imperial, or you might have use roofing squares, in which case you'll see feet or roofing squares. It's all measuring the same thing though, area squared. Start with the name of the component. You can change this name to whatever you like, but it will show up in the quote as you save it. It will also show up as you saw in the previous screen as the name of your component. So if you end up with a lot of components, you can search them. You just need to remember what you've named it. So keep it something that you'll recognize and understand straight away. The next thing is the labor rate. This is calculated per area squared, so the labor rate to install this underlay is going to be $3. This example is in dollars, but whatever unit you put here will be in the currency you chose as your default currency in your account settings. So that would be $3 per square meter to install. The next thing we'll cover is the item cost. Now there's 2 options for item cost. There's per unit, which would be per area squared, so per meter squared in this case. And the other option is fixed quantity. And fixed quantity is really useful for things that you might need to buy in rolls, pallets, crates, or boxes. And you get a set quantity in that crate or box, and that you need to purchase per box. So in this case, one underlay roll might be a 50 square meter roll that costs you $80 per roll, and let's assume this is a 200 square meter roof. Well, that would be simple. You would order 4 rolls, and in the quote itself, it would also apply 4 rolls at $80 for $320 total cost, or 4 50 square meter rolls. But if that job was actually 210 square meters, and you can only buy these in 50 square meter rolls, you might need to round up, right? You're going to need to order a full roll just to cover that last 10 square meters, and you'll end up with around 40 square meters of underlay. But this is important. QuoteCore Plus gives you the option to round up, and you can adjust this later in the quote because maybe you've got a spare roll sitting in the yard somewhere or in the back of the truck. You know, you've got that small 10 square meter area that you can cover, and you don't need to charge this customer an extra $80 because that may or may not be the difference between you winning and losing that quote. This is just an example. Obviously, if you've got a more expensive item and maybe it's $1,000 per item, well, that becomes important that you can remove that cost to win the job. The next thing is the waste type. You can add a waste amount in percentage, or you can do a fixed total. This would be per roll in this example, and per segment's not super applicable to the area measurement, but I'll show you where that comes in later. We'll leave it on percentage, and we move to the next really important part, apply the pitch calculation. So obviously, roofs can be flat, but more often they are pitched or have fall. So when you're measuring from a plan, you need to be able to account for that pitch or fall, which the plan view doesn't show. So what I mean by that, and most roofers will understand this, is when you measure something on a plan that's a flat aerial view. Perhaps you measured a hip or a valley on that flat aerial view, where that valley measures 5 meters according to the plan. But when you go to measure the actual roof, you'll find, depending on the pitch, that actually might be much longer than 5 meters, which makes a big difference, especially when you're quoting multiple lengths of hips and valleys. This allows you the ability to automatically calculate the pitch. You just need to know the roof pitch, and you need to know what the component measurement needs to take into account. So in this case, the roof area would use Rafter pitch. Now let's assume the roof has a 25-degree pitch. The program will auto-calculate your flat area squared to account for the extra area. You can change the pitch value from quote to quote. It'll just use these same settings and auto-calculate the correct figure. The waste gets added on top of that final figure. So apply Rafter pitch for this. You can add an image, I'll show you where that might be more useful later for flashings and things like that. You can add notes so you can explain exactly what this component's for, maybe leave notes for other team members. And then the next step is saving it. You can save it to an existing library, or you can create a brand new library, and you would name that library, and then this would be saved. You can create a new library here, and that's how component measurement works for area squared. And obviously area squared could be used for a huge amount of things in roofing. We've got corrugate long run, you've got rubber membrane, shingles, standing seam long run, TPO membrane. There are loads of things that are very useful for roofing, specifically, including underlay, netting, things like that. The next component we'll look at as a good example is a barge cap flashing. It's a cap flashing that goes at the end of a gable from on the roof down onto the barge board or the fascia board. You're going to want to use linear for this. Linear is a length measurement point to point. Width or depth are not taken into account for linear measurements, just measuring the distance from one point to another point or multiple points. Add your labor rate, and again, add your per unit cost. In this case, we've gone with per meter or per foot if you're using imperial. You could do fixed quantity, maybe for shingle or tile roofs. You might purchase these barge caps in boxes, perhaps box of 20 or something like that. In this case, you might put fixed quantity, maybe your cost is $50 per box, and you get 20 meters worth of caps per box. We'll keep it per unit, but we'll make it a fixed total this time. Last time we used percentage. This time we'll have a fixed total. So each individual length will get extra length automatically added as waste. Let's say you measured a 5-meter long barge cap flashing length, and the roof was, say, 25-degree pitch. The software will calculate take or plan length, then allow for pitch, making that plan length closer to the actual length, plus waste. Perhaps that 5-meter length now becomes 7 meters. And then it will also add the 0.25, allowing for waste. So the quoted length becomes 7.25, including waste. It's very customizable. You can have no waste if you wanted, or you could make this value anything you want. The next important part is, again, apply pitch calculation. And this is going to use the same rafter pitch as we used for area squared. If you have the actual measurement of the barge, then you will not need this, and you can create multiple flashings that either do or don't include pitch calculation. You can also override it in a quote. I can show you that later, but there's two options where you can override the auto calculation and apply an actual measurement. Here's a great example of when you might use an image of a barge cap flashing, and I'll show you this in another tutorial where you can upload these images, or you can even draw them using our app and then attach them to your barge cap flashing component. And this obviously is going to speed up the process when you go to order these items if you win a job, or if you want to measure a job and then order that job. Also, going back to this per segment, say you were doing multiple barge caps, and to save time, you changed your measurement type to linear multi-length. If linear single length is 2 clicks or point to point, multi-length is going to be 3 or more points in one run, and multi-length down here in the waist or per segment. Barges might not be the best example for this. So it might be something like measuring spouting around an entire house, and you click or measure around the entire house. Perhaps you end up with 10 or more individual lengths of spouting. It'll add waste to each segment to allow for cutting in corners or joins in. This ensures you've always got enough material. Let's save that. The next measurement type is another important one for roofing. Let's do a hip flashing. Let's go with linear again, add your labor and item cost, fixed per segment for waste. The important difference is down here. Apply pitch calculation to valley and hip pitch instead of rafter pitch. Again, very briefly, this is going to add extra length depending on the pitch of the roof. This works for valleys too, obviously, same process. Just a quick note, this hip and valley calculator assumes a standard hip or valley running at 45 degrees in plan view or in a bird's eye view, the view you'd see looking straight down at the roof from above it. Nothing to do with the roof pitch itself, which can be any pitch. That covers the main roofing specific component measurements that are affected by pitch calculation. You've got your area-based plus rafter pitch, you've got your linear lengths plus rafter pitch, and then you've got your linear-based hip and valley pitch calculated components. So another item that you'll use that is extremely flexible would be something like a downpipe. This is going to be a measurement type that you might use a lot of because it could in theory cover anything at all. We're going to use a downpipe as an example, a standard single-story downpipe. It's a fixed item. Let's put $20 to install and $25 to buy. It's priced per unit by default, but you might get these in packs, and you won't have that option in fixed. So if you wanted to create this as, let's say, you can only buy these downpipes as a 4-pack, you would need to change this to a linear measured component. But we'll leave it as it is because you could still use this for anything. It could be a skylight, it could be a chimney flashing, it could be site cleanup, site measure, delivery fee. So many options, and you can save them as needed. Waste percentage you can do fixed again or even none. Sometimes waste is not needed. Don't need to apply pitch calculation to a downpipe unless it's on some funky angle you are measuring by plan. You can add an image, notes, save. And just quickly to show you, when you add a new one, you define if it gets saved as a main component or an extra. All of those that I showed you, other than a couple, were main components. An extra just simply shows up in the quote as an extra. And you also apply this at a different stage in the quote if you're using components. Everything else is identical. It simply allows you to separate items in the quote. That's the roofing components. The goal, like I said, is to have created a system that you can bend and mold to what you need. Here we've got underlay, barge flashings, long run color steel, delivery fee as an extra, downpipes, hip flashings, metal fascia, so you can do metal fascia or it could be timber fascia, netting to go underneath roofing, maybe a commercial roof or a low pitch roof, parapet cap flashings, ridge flashings. Obviously ridge flashings are a linear unit, but they don't apply pitch. Rubber membrane, asphalt shingles, site measure as an extra. So we've got a lot of options here, and hopefully you seeing how they work allows you to see how you can make these components, measurement types, and pitch calculations work for your particular workflow. Let's cover the final measurement type, which is another that I think will be very common. Let's call it labor rate because it's going to be an hourly rate. Main component, but we changed this down here to hours, and you can charge per hour or per day. Let's just call it labor for now, it's universal and simple. With the previous components, we applied the labor rate directly to each component, but you could just apply the cost to purchase those components, then apply the labor pricing separately as its own component to give you more control in the form of hours. There are multiple options, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You charge an item cost or a labor rate. Let's say it's $30 per hour. Make sure it's in hours, not days. No waste, no pitch calculation for this. You probably don't need an image, but maybe you can leave one, and you might have different labor rates. You might have different levels of labor. You could put anything at all and leave a note for it there to explain it, and then save. So labor now becomes that final measurement type, which is down here, and you can apply that to a quote manually rather than measure it. That's it for the Roofing Smart components. Hopefully this helps you. Like I said, the goal is to create a system that allows you to build whatever you need.